to organizing your research and using citation managers. My name is Abby Morgan. I am the graduate assistant for the Research Commons. At the Research Commons we have different events where we try to focus on general grad student skills that you might need or might encounter. I've handed out a sheet, it's a questionnaire. Feel free to fill it out and just write down your thoughts on this workshop, but then also ideas you have on future workshops that we might be able to put together for you, especially it's the end of the year, so we're thinking about next year now. This is Kelsey. Kelsey is my supervisor and the head of the Research Commons. If you want to, you can speak maybe now or?
Sure. So aside from the grad student programming that Abby just mentioned, we also offer some broader faculty level support and some services like your subject specialist librarians, events where we bring faculty into the libraries to talk about their research, and spaces such as the reading room on the 4th floor, and we have a big open space on the 4th floor as well, where we'll be hosting more events in the future. So website is here, and most of our resources are accessible online as well.
Yep, so thank you, Kelsey. I've added our website link here. This is what our page looks like. You can click events, will probably get you where you want to go if you're interested in either our upcoming events, archived events, and our video resources are located there as well. Okay. So the outline for today, we've done our introductions. I went around the room before we officially started and kind of heard where you're coming from. Feel free to chime in as I'm going through if you have questions, or we'll also have a moment after everything for you to get some one-on-one questions in. I'm going to go over organizational strategies. These are best practices or tips that I've collected in my time as a grad student here, and that I've collected from colleagues as well. Then we're going to spotlight Zotero, the citation manager. There are other citation managers we'll discuss very briefly, but our focus will be on Zotero today. And then some storage options that I use are the cloud and then UMD box. It's always good to back up the work. And then we'll practice. These are the goals that I have. We'll obviously discuss note-taking and filing, storage, and citation managers. Hopefully we could share ideas. I would be happy to hear things that you find useful, and then practice. So these are my 5 tips for staying organized as a grad student. The first, and I'll go through slides, but I just want to lay out the tips. The first is to develop a note-taking flow, whether digital or handwritten. Make sure you're dating everything. These kind of go without saying, but you can in the moment forget to do these things, and then your notes can become a cluster jumbled. I'll get more into that. Make sure you have a filing system. Rename your PDFs, label your folders, and archive your materials wisely, particularly if you're teaching. Your teaching materials can become a resource for you that keeps on giving. Record everything you read. Record everything you read. I am going to offer my strategy, which is the one-page summary. It's sort of a spin on an annotated bibliography. I started doing them when I was studying for my comprehensive exams, and it's been the best thing I've ever done as a grad student. I have a record of everything I've read. I can always go back to it, and I'll show you more about that in a little bit. The fourth is to keep a running bibliography. Obviously, your citation managers can help you do this. I'm more of a manual person. I do it all by hand. It helps me to remember and recall during the writing process. I recommend you do it either by chapter if you're writing a dissertation, by topic, or if you don't want to do that, just have a page where you keep everything. You'll thank yourself if you're publishing or when it comes to the final stages of the writing. And then the 5th tip I have is to just set aside some time to organize. This could be at the top of the week for you, at the end of the week. Just set aside a designated time to get your life in order. All right. So the first tip I have in developing a note-taking flow, whether you're handwriting or doing digital notes, make sure you have some sort of method. Here I've linked, and the slides will be available for you, but I've linked some ideas. If you're doing handwritten notes, which I do, or I started out as a grad student doing that, there's the bullet journal. This is like a really pretty way to take notes. It's organized. I'll click the link for you. I don't have the time to do what they're doing, but I've seen people do it, and it helps them to be motivated to stay organized. I'll let that load. The second, I'll go back to it. The second handwritten tip I got from our data specialist librarian, David Durden. He recommends doing a lab notebook style. This, on the front end, is somewhat tedious, but it's worth it in the long run. This allows you to keep track of whatever you're doing. You set up a table of contents, and you page number, and you index. There's examples. Okay, so that's on this website here, and tips on how to put it together. Again, I'll provide links to these in the slides if you want to take a closer look at them. If you're not a scientist, it can still work for you is the point, and it can help you to stay organized. Here's an example of, the pictures are not. I thought this would happen, so I have pictures on the next slide. I'll get to it. So I'll get back to bullet journal. If you're not going to do any of that, I don't do that. You can organize your notebooks by topic, by class. That way you can just pick up and go. I have a meetings notebook as well. That helps with that. And then be aware of how you're going to, if you're going to digitally transfer your information. I often just take a picture and have a file for that. If you're not going to do the handwritten notes, that's totally fine. There are websites like, or apps like Evernote, which some of my colleagues swear by. Are you guys familiar with Evernote? I don't use it, but I've seen it in practice, and it's pretty cool. The benefits, it's free. It syncs, and you can record if you're in some sort of lecture and you want to record. Google Docs, obviously, is a good tool. And then there's OneNote. The presenter who previously did this workshop used OneNote, so we have a video on what that is online. Have any of you used OneNote before? How do you find it?
It's good, but it's messy.
It's good, but it's
Messy.
good but messy. I tend to agree. When I was a teacher, as a middle school teacher, I used OneNote for my students. They liked it because you could draw to take notes and things like that. It could be useful. I've linked it if you want to check it out. It's not free, though. You have to have Microsoft Office. So this is just an example of a bullet journal. If you feel like being artsy, it can be a pretty way to organize your life. So my number 2 tip is to have a filing system. Rename your PDFs to include author names, titles, and possibly even a note about the topic. Often when we download our files, they're just numbers, random numbers. And sometimes we save them, and we come back to them and don't know what it is, right? Take the step to rename. Seems pretty obvious, but again, when you're in the thick of research, you might not do that step. I personally rename my files using the date it was published, because that's how I think through my projects. Also, in addition to articles, or PDFs rather, when you're scanning books, it might be important, if you're just doing the chapter or a segment, to include the relevant bibliographic info. This might be the table of contents. I include the copyright page. Jungle Book is my example because I've just been watching a lot of movies with my son, and Jungle Book is on my mind. Here's a good time for me to plug the Scan and Deliver service. This can be a useful way. Are you guys familiar with what this is? If you want to request a chapter of a book, you can have the library scan it for you and deliver it as a PDF. It's really useful. I did it yesterday. There's a link to that as well.
Also works for journal articles,
Yeah.
if it's something that we have on our shelf in paper.
And if the library doesn't have it, they can do the it new? I don't think so.
No, it started out as, it had a different name, which apparently I have forgotten since it changed to Scan and Deliver. But basically it's a way to get PDF versions of portions of things that we have on our shelves. So we won't scan a whole book for you, we'll scan a chapter or the table of contents, or up to 20% of a journal issue that we have in the stacks.
I literally requested it yesterday and I got it the same day.
That's good.
Yeah, it was really nice. Again, give your folders meaningful and consistent names. A colleague of mine showed me this screenshot and he said he wished he did not name them by course number because he doesn't know what it means anymore. So I would name it by the topic, right? What was that class covering? Later on in the writing stages, I've archived my work, which I'll get to, and I try to make them just descriptive. By year, I organize it. It's been a long time, y'all. And then I can't stress this one enough. Archive your teaching materials. Are you guys teaching? Any of you? Yeah. And you guys are probably better at this than I am. But I remember my dad once said, oh, you've been teaching for 10 years. You don't even need to write any more lesson plans. At the time, I was like, I need to get my lesson plans organized because I'm still writing them. Don't reinvent the wheel. Archive your work and then make tweaks and changes. It'll really save your life, especially when research is your focus here. My third tip is to record everything you read. I started doing this my third year in grad school and haven't looked back. I call them the one-page summaries. They're a little different than an annotated bib in that they're not formal. These are just notes for you. You can say whatever you want in them, really. This is what my file looks like. I said this is a little small, but I like to organize. Oops, I'm used to Macs, I'm sorry guys. I used to organize mine by year. That way I can just say at the top of the century what was Black literature doing, right? I can just click. Super useful. So in this 1 to 2 page summary, after I finish a text, a book, anything I touch, even if it's just a skim, I always write down the author's argument in some key terms, my questions, or the author's questions. And then I give a little paragraph to my free thoughts and investments in my project. Sometimes I include quotes if I know it's something I'm going to write about. The reason why this was so useful to me is because I would say to myself in drafting an outline, I know I want to talk about X author in this text. I would literally go back here and copy paste my thoughts and just paste them into my outline for a dissertation chapter with the quotes already there. And I just was like, patting myself on the back. Because even if my argument makes no sense, I have a nice little outline there. I recommend it. Do it. My fourth tip is kind of what you guys are here for, but the longhand of it, I keep a running bibliography by chapter. Enter your info right away as soon as you start researching. Be sure to capture all the information about a source, etc. Doing it after the fact is just really tedious. But, and then my fifth tip is set aside time for organization. This might include having a time to go through your due dates for fellowships. I've missed some fellowship deadlines and just kicked myself. Have a folder for that, right? And use that time to set these things up. Let me make sure. Oh yeah, and then take the time to input in your calendar. I think Kelsey can attest to this. If I don't write it down and sync it in my phone, I'm going to forget if it's not a reminder. So take the time to do that. I have no brain when it comes to that. All right. I mean, since high school, right, we should have been backing up our work, or at least learn to do that. Make sure you're saving in multiple spaces and places. I use the cloud. Some people don't feel comfortable with doing that because of its fuzzy privacy issues. Do you guys have other things you use for backup?
custom hardware.
Right. I use an external as well. I recommend that. And then we also have access to UMD box. If you are a student here, you can use that. A lot of professors use that as well.
What is the capacity of FD storage available in the box? Like if Google Drive,
I think the UMD box is more storage. than-
Yes. That's, I think, available in the guide that we can send the link for. But if off the top of my head, I'm fairly certain that box is up to like 50 megabytes. And Google is like 20. But you can, if you're working on a project on campus, you can ask for increased box storage if you think you'll go over that 50 megabytes. I will say, don't pay for storage. I spoke to a grad student recently who had, an expanded Dropbox account, expanded this account, the other account, extra room on whatever online platform that she was paying out of pocket for. But the university has a lot of different ways to get you online space if you need it. So definitely try those out first before you start dropping your own cache.
Yeah, I've exhausted my Google storage. Yeah, and I'm just a humanities person, I can imagine the science people. But this is just how I set mine up. I color code it because I'm a dork, and I just like to be able to access my files at all times. It eliminates my baggage that I have to lug around. And then I'll close with just some personal life organization balance. I attended a talk yesterday, and the professor gave some life tips, and I was like, that's cool. The first tip I have is declutter your home. That has helped tremendously with my academic life. I can get into that if you want in one-on-one sessions, but you get home and you don't have to be cluttered with the stress of it. You can just focus on what you want to do, which is right. What you have to do. Number 2 is to set long-term and short-term goals. When I started grad school, I was good at setting the long-term, but not the short-term. And it would bug my director. She would say I was just being too ambitious. So the short-term goals, right? Long-term, submit chapter by the end of the summer. Short-term, submit outline to director by May 1st. In the same vein, always have a daily goal when you sit down to do your work. Some people like to write to-do lists. I like to write done lists. So what I've done, it helps motivate me more. And then my quote here, it's kind of weird, but it's something that my dad says. When a boxer is up against the ropes and feels like they're getting pummeled, they just keep touching their opponent to let them know they're still in the fight. Well, that's what I try to do with my work. I try to just keep touching it every day, right? Even if it's to title a section, even if it's just to, edit a line. Just keep touching it. Touch the project. In the long fight. 4th, be accountable. Join a writing group if you can. I do an online one. The best way for me to stay accountable is I do conferences. It makes sure that I have a product. I'm going to get up in front of people and talk. When I finish the talk, who knows if it went well, but I have something. So make sure you're staying accountable on top of your due dates. And then the 5th, sort of me talking to myself, know when to come up for air. Get some distance from your project. It'll allow you to see if your organization strategies are working. And then also know when to say no. Right? Happy hour is not going anywhere, but your funding is. Think about it. Okay. So that's sort of my thing. Thank you. If you have questions, you can ask them at the end, and I'll segue to Kelsey.
Thank you, Abby. I feel very inspired now.
Yeah, try to be positive.
Yeah, I also, there's some stuff that I haven't been doing very well out of that list as well. So even if these feel a little bit aspirational, it's good to have something to aspire to and to not just resign yourself to the fact that you will always be behind and you will not be organized and you're just that person, right? There's always a moment when you can say, no, I'm going to do it a different way. So my part of the presentation will be less inspiring, I imagine, and more hands-on practical, all right? So This is titled Organizing Your Research and Citation Managers. So citation managers, okay, we're going to ignore you for a second. We'll leave it there. So some of the programs that you might have heard of are Zotero, Mendeley, EndNote, and they help you stay organized in ways like Abby just demonstrated, but it's a little bit more automatic, at least when it comes to keeping track of sources and processing, reading, taking notes about them, okay? So I'm going to show you Zotero today, but we also have resources we have a nice tutorial video for Mendeley on the guide that we'll send out, and we also have linked resources for EndNote. So the one distinction I'll make in advance is that through the university you all have access to EndNote Online, formerly known as EndNote Web. The university does not provide EndNote Desktop. So EndNote Desktop is a more robust program, but it's not supported by the university. So we won't talk about it today, and we unfortunately don't have as many experts on EndNote Desktop because it's not something, I see some disappointment. So I try to start with a sort of a caveat on that front. EndNote Desktop is a great program that a lot of people use. It's also a really super expensive program, especially when you're talking about providing something at a university-wide scale. So Zotero, Mendeley have the virtue of being completely free. Zotero is open source as well, which means it's always being updated and improved by people out in the world. So I'm going to be using the standalone version of Zotero for Windows. They also have it for Mac and Linux as well. And I'm using the Chrome extension, which I already have set up. You can see by my little Z right there that Zotero is running. So all of these things can be downloaded from Zotero.org. The internet's a little slow today, but that's okay. So while it's thinking, this is where you can, it talks about being your personal research assistant. As you scroll down, you can find out how to download it and get the different parts of the platform. So once you set up your Zotero for Windows, Zotero for Mac, what have you, that's when it will automatically set up your plugin for Word, so you can write with Zotero as well. If at any point you're like, my plugin isn't working, this isn't showing up, you can always go back to this page, download it again, make sure it's all installed nicely. And basically what I'm going to do today is show you how to store and organize sources you find while you're doing research, process those sources while you read them, like Abby's one-page summaries, and then use the Word plugin to automatically create citations and do your bibliography while you're actually writing. So there'll definitely be time at the end for you to try this out on your own, and both Abby and I will be available to go around and help folks after we finish up. Okay? All right, so you're welcome to ask questions as I go along. If there's something that you're not sure how it worked or it seems like magic, I'm happy to stop and explain things if I go too fast. Okay? All right, so that's the plan. So first step is I have my Zotero open. This is synced with my account, so you'll notice I have all of my folders in here, including the ones that I set up in grad school when I was working on final projects and the like, but also different projects that I've done. These are my sources for a journal article that I published last year, so I have everything all together in one place. And then I also have some group libraries for things that I've written with other people, including this one, which is a book chapter that came out. I have another book chapter, and then a couple more articles. Okay, so that's what you're looking at right now. I'm going to create a new folder for today's research to keep things organized. So I'm going to start with my research question, which for today's purposes is going to be, how can health informatics empower patients? So we'll all probably be patients at some point, even if we're not into health informatics. So I figured we could get behind this a little bit. So let's say health informatics resources for today. Okay. So I have an empty folder here. I have it highlighted. So now I'm going to begin my research. And because we're a fairly interdisciplinary crowd, I'm going to go ahead and use Google Scholar. We, of course, have hundreds, literally, of library databases. Zotero does interface with those. You can grab those resources from Web of Science, from any of your disciplinary databases, from our catalog, WorldCat, if you're working with books, or even out in the wilds of the internet. Zotero is set up to handle things like blog posts, tweets even, which they like to call micro blog posts, and all kinds of different platforms like presentations, interviews, all that kind of thing, okay? So I'm going to start with my search. I'm using my own laptop, which means I've perhaps tried this out in the past. So I just typed in health informatics patient empowerment. Of course, I get like 30,000 results. I'm just going to show you how it works to add a few things into Zotero. Okay, so I'm looking at a page with multiple results on it. So up here in my plugin, I see a little folder. So if I click on the folder, it gives me all of the articles that are showing on that page, and I can grab multiple articles at once. Okay, so that's one option. I think I want this one. I don't care as much about social media. Patient-provider health information gap. Okay. All right, so it tells me it's saving those. It's putting them in the right folder. And we'll let it think away here for a second since the internet is not the fastest. So while we're looking at that, you know, as you're doing research, you end up going down different pathways, right? So maybe you see one article and you think, oh, you know, that's something that I would like to follow up on. So this first one, it's in the British Medical Journal. It's from 2000, so it's a little bit dated at this point. I mean, health informatics has changed a great deal in the last 18 years. So I'm going to go ahead and click the Cited By link. Have you all tried this before? A couple. Okay, so it basically shows you research that has been published that has cited this article since it came out. Okay, so you can use this over here to change your time frame. I'm really only looking for recent stuff. Okay. And now I'm going to, oh, that one looks good. Grab a couple of these for my Zotero account as well. Consumer health information technology, health equity, absolutely. Consumer health informatics, okay. So we'll save those as well. So those are saving away. Obviously, I'm simplifying the source selection process here because you're going to put more time into actually deciding what you use in your research. But for our purposes, I now have these sources saved in my folder. If you take a look at this, it gives you the information that you will need to cite it again in the future. Okay. So all of the authors, this is a book chapter in this case. There's your helpful little icon so you know what it is. And you can always come back to it, all right? So if you look at in this case it hasn't included a PDF version because that wasn't available through Google Scholar. But if we double click on it, it takes us back to where we got it. Not fast today. Okay.
So you mean that when you grab things from Google Scholar, it will not automatically...
It depends. So when you're looking at this page in Google Scholar, for example, you'll notice that some of these have like a full view over here, or it will say PDF.
Right.
Those ones it will pull the PDF in for.
Automatically.
Yep. But if it's not available, like this one, for example, it won't do it automatically. So there's a couple strategies for how you can include it later on, and I do recommend doing that. Okay, so we are over here. Okay, so it's taken us back to the Science Direct page where we can get that PDF, and we also can get the citation information that we had before, okay? So let's say, let me see which one did an excellent job of that. Okay, let me see about this. All right. So that first one, it did pull in the PDF, so you can see the icon right there where it says full text. So I opened it in just regular Acrobat Reader automatically, and Zotero sets up a file or a folder on your computer where it stores these PDFs that it keeps from you. It also syncs that with your online account that you have with Zotero.org. So that means that you can access these resources from elsewhere. It also means that if you make notes on something here, and it will sync with that online account. Yeah.
So I just want to know, like, as if on the Zotero we can see the name, the title of the page, for example, this paper, but when it stores to the computer, in the folder where it is stored, does it have that title, or it's just
So it doesn't automatically. It saves it with whatever random PDF title it had. So there is a plugin for Zotero because it's an open source software. It's called Zotfile, like Zotfile, and it will do that for you. So Mendeley comes with that feature out of the box. So Mendeley, you can tell it to rename every PDF that it downloads and do it in the format that you want. So for example, year, author, title, or author, title, year, whatever you want. Mendeley will do that automatically, and Zotfile, the Zotfile plugin will make Zotero do that as well. It also sets up what Mendeley calls a watch folder functionality, where you can have a folder on your computer where you could click and drag PDFs or save their PDFs to them when you download them, and then it will automatically add those to your Zotero or Mendeley account, just by virtue of putting it in that folder. Yeah.
When you grab a paper down, would Zotero automatically save the DOI?
So it depends on whether it has a DOI, because not every, so for example, we're looking at a book chapter won't necessarily have a DOI, so it wouldn't have one in this case. So it depends on the format. So if you look at an article, for example, this is a journal article, and you look down, it hasn't grabbed the DOI. You could always, I think that's the one that I have open right now, add that information. So yeah, there we go. So it does have the DOI right here. I'm just going to copy it real quick. So the automatic import function, like I just showed you, is pretty awesome, right? It does a great job probably 90% of the time, but it is dependent on the underlying data. So the Google Scholar record for this one is a little bit sparse. It doesn't have as much information. If we grab this from a library database, then it would have a full citation with all of that information, and it would be more complete. So it depends on the underlying information, and you are the one who's going to want to double check that. So I advocate for doing that at the moment. So it's better to take a look at this and say, oh, that one didn't grab the DOI, but it's always, you can always get back to it through Zotero if you don't do it right at that time. Okay? So it's the good data in, good data out, garbage data in, garbage data out. That's kind of how this system works as well. Okay, so you have just found all these sources. I don't remember anything about any of them at this point. I work a lot with Dr. Linda McCree from the Graduate Writing Center, and she has this great quote from Umberto Eco, who's an Italian theorist, and he points out that just making a copy of something does not mean that you have read it. So in this day and age, it's more like just downloading a PDF does not mean that you have read it. You have to actually read it and think about it, and hopefully write something about it in your own words so that you can remember it. So you can, of course, go through and use some of the built-in tools in your PDF reader, whether you're using Adobe Acrobat or whatever. So you can highlight stuff, you can put in comments, however you typically process your materials. But I am a big fan of writing something in your own words about it. So whether it's a one-page summary, which you could actually just do right here in Zotero. So if you want to do some sort of more granular commentary on the document itself, you can go ahead and do that. You can save it and it will sync. But if you want to talk about the whole source, so I'm just going to make some stuff up here, but if you click on notes, you can add notes about this source. So we could say that this one is a solid book chapter about changes in health informatics over the past 20 years, important to consider for chapter 2. Make sure you reference so-and-so on page 20, et cetera, et cetera. So some of those headers that Abby had, you could work in here. So quotes, your own thoughts, the main argument of this work, that kind of thing. You can add, you can see over here, it shows up under that source, so it's all kept together in the same place, except for I put it on the wrong one. Good job, Kelsey. So again, you should probably be paying attention while you're, doing this processing. You don't want to put your notes on the wrong source because that will obviously stymie you down the road. So we have our full text, we have our comments, we can get back to it. We have over here under info all the information that we need to cite it. Okay. We can also, if you're into it, I am not a tag person, as you could probably tell by the fact that I have a gajillion things in here and 0 tags. If you like to tag your sources, you could put things like, which chapter it's about, which general topic, if you keep coming across the same author, and you could get to them very quickly. Also, you can set up relations between sources. So let's say you want to make sure these two are very closely related. You can tell it, oh, well, you need to think about this source at the same time, and now you have a related source added in there. Okay. So there's a lot of really great features with Zotero. This is kind of the basics of finding sources and including them in your library. I just want to share some pro tips about this part of things. So you definitely want to make sure that you're using what they call collections and sub-collections. So I call them folders and subfolders because that makes more sense to me. But for example, for French, I have a subfolder for this final paper. And then I have, some subfolders. For example, these are the sources that I ended up not wanting to use. I just moved them into a subfolder, so I didn't lose them, but they were still there. Okay? So we showed some examples of getting to the text. You can also add PDFs into the Zotero library manually, for example. So let's say you requested something through Scan and Deliver, you have an email version of a PDF. I'm sure I have a random PDF on my desktop right now that we can borrow. Oh, look at that, it's the actual document. Okay, perfect. This is why it pays off to teach these workshops more than once. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag that PDF from my desktop. Now I have it stored in here as well. Okay. So that's an easy way to keep PDFs in one place, and then those stay within your Zotero account. There is a max on your storage that you can sync to the cloud. I'm not 100% sure what that is off the top of my head, but it's definitely in our documentation that we'll share. So I mentioned you want to use the notes feature so you can record important details about individual sources. You want to make sure that you check that all of this stuff has imported correctly. There was one I saw right over here, right, so this is, I don't think it capitalized the journal title right. I think it should be International Journal of Medical Informatics, and I think that should be capitalized. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that right now. Okay, I saw it, I'm going to fix it. It's easiest to do that when it's fresh in your mind, so you're not going back a couple of years from now when you don't remember anything about this source, and you're like, oh, what is that journal title? BMJ? Oh, British Medical Journal. I should have just dealt with that at the moment. Is anybody here working with foreign language sources? Yes, okay. So it's actually very helpful to tell Zotero what language your source is in, because then it will capitalize it correctly when it does the citation. So that can be hugely helpful when you're working with stuff in other languages.
I found that it doesn't. Sorry.
Even if you said it?
No, I found that I can't use my normal
Oh.
in accents.
When you're in Zotero?
When I'm taking notes in Zotero.
Yeah. So the word accent shortcuts don't necessarily work in all programs. So what you can do in that case is write it in Word and then paste it into Zotero, which is a pain. But that's something that I might look into the Zotero documentation a little bit more for. So because Zotero is open source, there's stuff about it all over the internet. So Zotero foreign language diacritics notes. Diacritical Martin notes. Zotero forms. Okay. Yeah. So there's lots of stuff out there that you could use to figure out the best way to do that, aside from just working in Word and then copying and pasting. So that's one of the other benefits of using, say, Zotero instead of a proprietary system like EndNote, because EndNote is pretty locked down and I have not had very good luck finding support for it in the wilds of the internet. Okay, great question. I hadn't thought about that before. Okay, so I showed you that little, so you'll notice when we're out here, we already have, we're looking at an individual article here, so the little, actually, let me get to this page. Oh, this is that one. All right, so this is a good example. So it gives you a slightly different icon. It says it's going to save this web page. When you're looking at a page full of sources, like we were, that's when you see the folder icon, okay? So it does depend on what type of thing you're trying to add. You can also add sources manually if you need to. And there's a multitude of different formats that you can add in. So dictionary entry, newspaper article, podcast, a patent, right? And so if you say you're going to enter a patent, it knows which fields you should be saving for that. So for example, the patent number and the issuing authority and all of that business, okay? So one thing that I highly recommend setting up, it's actually found under preferences, so it's edit preferences, and it is on the search page, is this PDF indexing. And so what PDF indexing does is you can have a random PDF file that you've saved in your Zotero account. It will go out and search for that on Google Scholar and pull in all of the metadata around it. So mine is already active. You do have to activate this. It doesn't, it's already built into Zotero, but you have to say, yes, please install this and use it. An indexed PDF takes up a little bit more space than a non-indexed PDF, which is why they don't do it automatically. So for example, this is a PDF. We already have the information for it, but I'll show you how it works. Okay, so it doesn't work because we already have the information for it, so let me just drag a random PDF in here again. We'll use this one, just for demo's sake. Okay, so I'm just putting this in this folder. I'm not putting it underneath any of these. So it's just a standalone PDF. If you do this retrieve metadata for PDF option, it goes out, it looks for it, and now it shows us the full article information for it, okay? And you can do this for a whole folder of PDFs all at once. So let's say you've not used Zotero up to this point, you have a whole bunch of PDFs. You can click and drag all of them into your Zotero folder that you want to use, then right-click, retrieve metadata. It will pull all that information in from Google Scholar. It's not awesome for things like government reports. I don't know if you have some random PowerPoints in there. It won't find everything, but for the majority of stuff, it will do that automatically. Is anybody looking at sources chronologically? Maybe, well, I won't show it, but there is a timeline feature where you can visualize where your sources land in time, which is pretty cool. And the other thing that the PDF indexing does is it allows you to search the full text of the article. So if you can't remember the title of something and you just remember, oh yeah, there was this quote, you could type that in there, search everything, and it would search through the full text of the PDFs as well. Yeah?
I got a lost in preferences.
So it's edit, preferences, and then it's on the search tab.
And then what do you select for?
So because I've already installed it,
Yeah.
it asks you something like, do you want to install this? And you just click install.
Yeah, so just click OK.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
We can look at it afterwards
Okay.
and see, yeah, because that can be really beneficial. Since I've had it set up for a while, I don't remember what the screen looks like, so I'll come over afterwards. Okay, and then the other nice thing is this little wizard wand right there, I think it's supposed to be. You can add items by identifier, which is ISBN, DOI, or the PubMed ID if you're working in PubMed a lot. Okay, so if you already have that DOI, you can just type it in here and it will pull it in automatically. So that can be a really quick way to add things if you've seen it in a bibliography somewhere else. I will employ one of many, many solutions to avoid ever typing in anything manually. So whether it be, typing in a little DOI as opposed to a whole citation, I will do that every time. I will also do a lot of Googling to get to the page so that I can automatically import the stuff into Zotero instead of typing things. God forbid I have to type, right? Okay, so those are some of the more advanced features of Zotero. There are a lot more things that you can do with Zotero. And because it's open source and they have these robust forums, I highly recommend Googling if you have any questions about it. And we didn't cover it today. So one of the most awesome parts of Zotero is writing with it. So I'm going to open up Word. I have a blank document here. I've already set up the Zotero plugin. This may show up a little bit differently if you're on a Mac or in an earlier version of Word. But it has the different options right now, okay? So I'm going to start typing my project, and I've drafted this beautiful language. Eisenbach's review article provides a good snapshot of the consumer health informatics field in 2000. Okay, so we need to cite that. I'm going to click Add or Edit Citation. I have to tell it which format I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and go with APA, which is in-text citation. It pops up a little window so that I can find which source I need. I want Eisenbach. This is British Medical Journal. It shows up multiple times because I've used this example a lot. I probably need to get a new one at this point. Maybe for the fall semester we'll try some new topics. So pulls that in. Since we've actually already mentioned the author's name in the sentence, I'm going to go ahead and suppress the author. And I'm going to make up a page number for the moment for where it is being cited. I will hit enter. Enter. It enters the in-text citation right there. Okay. Coulter's 1999 article. Indicating blah, blah, blah. I'm very much more eloquent usually, I swear. Okay. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Just pretend that never happened. I clicked the wrong button. Okay, add edit citation. We know we have to cite this Coulter one. And this one, I also put her name in there. And it's about the whole article, so I won't put a page number. Okay. Now I am done with my brilliant paper, and I need to insert my references. And that's when you click the Add Edit Bibliography button, and it inserts the citations for whatever you've cited so far in that paper. Okay, so it does do a decent job of following the citation styles, right? So we know that APA only uses the first initial. The year goes right there. The italics are correct, but you do want to double check these, okay? So if you notice something that is wrong, for example, I actually just wanted to say British Medical Journal as opposed to BMJ. Rather than just typing right here, I am going to do the Add Edit Bibliography option. and it will pull up the sources that I've cited so far so I can change it, okay? So when you do it this way, it will also save in your Zotero library, so it's updated in one place, and the next time you need to cite this thing, it will be correct. Okay, now we're good. So you'll notice that these are kind of grayed out. It uses word fields to store this stuff. The cool part is that if, say, you submit this to a journal that uses APA style, you get rejected, and then you want to resubmit to something that uses Chicago style, you can change that. So you can go into your document preferences, say you want to do a Chicago Manual of Style note, hit OK, and it changes to footnotes down here at the bottom, and then it will have your references correct in that style at the end. Okay, so that can save years of your life if the situation happens. If you are all done, you are ready to go, your paper is finished, it's in its final format, you're going to want to click this button. So you're going to want to save a copy, save a version that says like, this is my final version with Zotero fields. You can unlink your citations. So that means that the version that you submit to your editor or whoever it might be doesn't have these weird gray fields in it, and it's like the final version that's good to go. So the deal with that is that then when you get things back, you're going to want to work on your version that has the Zotero field codes in it still, and that way you'll be able to update the citations like I just showed you. Okay. All right. So those are the main things I wanted to show about Zotero and writing in Word. I just want to make sure, and we'll send the link out for this, but we have this all in an online guide. So it's lib.guides.umd.edu/organized research. We tried to make it obvious. So we have essential tips, the citation management bit, and this is where we have a lot of information about Mendeley alongside Zotero, okay, including further resources, all right? So this link will go around, and now we have a fair amount of time for folks who have questions, who want to try stuff. You have an individual question or a general?
Yeah, like a question about Zotero.
Yes.
So when, like if you have like the same source repeated in several folders, right, so you can do it right, of course, right? And it doesn't duplicate, like if you download or if you have like a PDF, it doesn't duplicate the actual document, right?
It would.
It would?
Yeah. So for example, I have this other, okay, so this is the folder that we were using, no. So this is one that I've done for a different class like this.